The night Evelyn decided to humiliate me, the house was glowing with too much light and laughter. She had invited half the neighborhood for what she called a celebration of family. I stood at the edge of the dining room in my modest navy dress, pouring iced tea for her friends who preferred champagne. I had made most of the food myself, though she had taken the credit, strutting from guest to guest, boasting about her perfect home. I didn't mind being quiet. I had learned to let her have her stage. But Evelyn wasn't content with ignoring me. No, her cruelty needed an audience. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video? As I set a tray of hors d'oeuvres on the table, one of her friends, a sharp-looking woman with diamonds at her throat, asked where the children were. Evelyn laughed too loudly, tossed her hair and said, "Oh, they're with Margaret. You know, our free live-in helper." Then she turned, her voice rising just enough to fill the room. "Honestly, why is this old skeleton still here? She should be in a rocking chair, not lurking around my house." The room erupted in laughter. Glasses clinked, someone even clapped, and Evelyn bowed dramatically as if she had just delivered the line of the night. I froze. The tray in my hands trembled, the ice clinking against the glass pitcher. Every eye in the room turned to me, not with sympathy but with smirks, waiting to see if I would crack, if the skeleton would collapse into dust. Daniel, my son, stood in the corner, pretending to sip his drink. He didn't defend me. He didn't even look ashamed. He just lowered his gaze, letting Evelyn's words hang in the air like smoke. My face burned, but I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. Instead, I smiled. Not the smile of someone beaten down, but the kind of quiet curve of the lips that hides a storm beneath. Because Evelyn thought she was clever, dragging me into the spotlight as her joke. She thought her words would bury me, but I knew something she didn't. The skeleton she should have feared wasn't me. It was hers. The one rattling in her closet, the one I had discovered weeks earlier when she left her phone on the counter, buzzing with messages she didn't want Daniel to see. The one I had tucked away, waiting for the right moment. So when she called me a skeleton in front of her guests, I smiled, because I knew by the time the night was over, it wouldn't be my bones that people remembered. It would be hers. The laughter from Evelyn's skeleton remark lingered in the air like smoke long after the guests returned to their wine glasses and shallow conversations. She moved through the crowd like a queen, her heels clicking on the polished floors, her laughter too sharp, too loud, determined to remind everyone she held the stage. Daniel trailed behind her, smiling weakly, offering refills, pretending nothing had just happened, pretending his mother hadn't been humiliated in her own home. I moved back into the kitchen, my hands steady as I placed the tray on the counter. My heart should have been pounding with shame, but instead it was curiously calm, as though Evelyn's cruelty had unlocked something I'd been holding in for far too long. I smoothed my dress, took a slow sip of water, and listened. "Really, she just lingers," Evelyn was saying, her voice drifting in from the living room. "I told Daniel she should be somewhere else at her age, but what can we do? She has nowhere to go. We keep her out of pity. And she babysits, so it's convenient. Otherwise..." She trailed off, letting her friends fill in the blanks. Their laughter answered for her. I pressed my lips together. Convenient. That's what I had been reduced to. A prop. A body to keep her children quiet while she hosted parties in silk blouses bought with money she hadn't earned. But the longer she spoke, the bolder she became, and boldness always leads to cracks. I heard one of the guests ask casually, "And how do you manage everything? You make it look effortless." Evelyn lowered her voice, but I was close enough to hear. "Well, Daniel thinks he's the provider, but between you and me, let's just say I've found other ways to keep this lifestyle afloat." The woman gasped theatrically, giggling into her glass. Evelyn winked. My hands stilled. Other ways. I knew exactly what she meant, because weeks earlier, when she had carelessly left her phone buzzing on the counter, I had seen the messages, late-night texts, hotel bookings, wire transfers, secrets Evelyn thought she buried under her perfect smile, skeletons she never expected me to find. I hadn't said a word then. I had tucked the knowledge away, quiet as always. But now, after tonight, after being paraded like a useless relic, I knew silence was no longer kindness. It was a weapon. The evening dragged on. Evelyn gave her little speeches. Daniel nodded in her shadow. The children were shuffled upstairs, their laughter fading behind closed doors. I busied myself with clearing plates, the perfect skeleton servant in the background. No one noticed when I slipped away to my room. I opened the small wooden box in my nightstand and pulled out the envelope I had hidden there. Inside were the printouts, screenshots of Evelyn's messages, receipts of transactions under Daniel's nose, and one very damning email confirming an appointment at a fertility clinic in another man's name. Proof not only of her infidelity, but of how deep her deceit ran. I spread them across the bed, my fingers brushing the papers. Every line of text, every timestamp, every receipt was a bone in Evelyn's closet, sharp and brittle, ready to pierce her flawless image. As the clock ticked toward midnight, I tucked the papers back into the envelope and slipped it into my purse. My reflection in the mirror caught my eye. Silver hair, tired lines, but eyes that burned steady. Not a skeleton, not a burden, a witness, and soon, a judge. When I returned to the dining room, the crowd had thinned. Only Evelyn's closest friends remaining, perched on couches with their shoes kicked off, red wine staining their lips. Evelyn leaned back, laughing too loud at her own joke, her voice dripping with smugness. "Honestly," she said, her eyes landing on me like a knife, "I don't know why she still hangs around. Maybe she's waiting for someone to write her obituary at the dinner table." Her friends roared. Daniel chuckled weakly, adjusting his collar. Evelyn smirked, thinking she'd buried me for good. But I smiled again, the same quiet curve of lips I had worn hours earlier. And I thought, keep laughing, Evelyn, because the skeleton you fear isn't standing in front of you. It's rattling in your own closet, and tonight the door will open. The party had wound down to its final notes of laughter when I made my move. The children were asleep upstairs. Daniel was leaning heavily on the arm of a chair, his tie loosened, his eyelids heavy with drink. Evelyn still floated about, cheeks flushed with wine, her voice filling every corner of the room as though silence itself might betray her. Her friends lingered, eager for another round of gossip, their eyes following her like moths to a flame. I walked into the room carrying nothing more than my purse. The chatter softened when they noticed me, perhaps expecting another joke at my expense. Evelyn smirked immediately. "There's our skeleton," she said, raising her glass, her friends chuckling on cue. "Come to join us, Margaret? Or are you going to haunt the kitchen again?" I set my purse on the coffee table, calmly pulling out the envelope. "You call me a skeleton," I said softly, my voice steady enough to slice through their laughter. "But I think tonight it's time we talk about the bones rattling in your closet, Evelyn." The smirk wavered. Her friends leaned forward, curiosity sharpening their faces. Daniel blinked, confused, straightening in his chair. I laid the first paper on the table, a printed screenshot glowing in black and white. Evelyn's phone messages, midnight confessions, hotel bookings, love notes signed by someone who wasn't my son. Gasps rippled around the room. "What is this?" Daniel asked, his voice cracking. He snatched up the page, his eyes racing across the lines, the color drained from his face. Evelyn lunged forward, grabbing at the envelope, but I pressed a firm hand over it. "Not yet," I said quietly. "You wanted to make me a spectacle. Let's finish your show properly." The next paper fell onto the table, receipts of wire transfers from Daniel's joint account to an unfamiliar name, thousands, over months, hidden beneath fake invoices. Evelyn's friends murmured to one another, their laughter gone, replaced with sharp whispers. And then the last one, the appointment confirmation. A fertility clinic, another man's name listed beside hers. Proof Evelyn had been planning a future without Daniel, while draining him dry in the present. Daniel's hands shook as he held the paper. His jaw clenched, his voice barely more than a rasp. You've been cheating on me? Using my money?" Evelyn's mask cracked, her painted smile gone, her eyes wild. "It's not what it looks like," she snapped. But even her friends were staring now, their expressions hard. The perfect hostess, stripped bare in her own living room. I stood, my hands steady, my voice calm. "You called me an old skeleton tonight, Evelyn. You paraded me as your joke, your burden, the ghost you couldn't get rid of. But this," I gestured at the papers scattered like ashes across the table, "this is the skeleton you've been hiding, and now everyone has seen it." The room fell silent, the kind of silence that roars louder than laughter ever could. Evelyn collapsed onto the couch, her hands covering her face, her shoulders shaking, not with shame, but with fury that she had been beaten at her own game. Daniel didn't look at her. He didn't look at me either. He simply stared at the evidence, the truth finally too heavy for him to ignore. I picked up my purse, tucking the empty envelope back inside. "You thought I would always be your shadow, Evelyn, that I would let your words bury me, but I am not the skeleton in this house. I never was." As I walked toward the door, I heard the shuffle of chairs behind me, the scrape of voices breaking into angry questions, the sound of Evelyn's sobs muffled under the weight of her own lies. I stepped outside into the cool night, the air clean, the stars sharp above me. For the first time in years, I breathed freely. "Why is this old skeleton still here?" my daughter-in-law had shouted at her guests. I smiled, because the skeleton wasn't mine to hide, and now it was hers, and hers alone, to choke on. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video.